A new year, a new currency. For the entire nation of Bulgaria, the moment the calendar flipped to 2026 was, well, it was huge. It marked this historic and honestly deeply divisive moment, the end of their national currency, the lev, and the beginning of a whole new life with the euro. So let's break down what this monumental shift is all about.
So here's what we're going to get into. First, we'll talk about the birth of this new currency era. Then, the long road it took to even get here, and why the country is so split on this. After that, we'll look at the nitty-gritty details of how the switch actually works. And finally, why pretty much the rest of Europe is watching this whole thing so closely.
All right, let's set the scene. Picture this. It's New Year's Eve. People are counting down to midnight, and boom, a giant symbol of the euro is projected right onto the front of the country's central bank. I mean, what a statement. This was a moment that was literally years in the making. And just like that, it was official. Bulgaria became the 21st member of the Eurozone. The lev, which actually means lion and had been the currency since 1881, was gone, replaced. The country's president called it the final crucial step in Bulgaria's complete integration into the EU. But you gotta ask, why? Why make such a massive change? This wasn't some snap decision, not at all. It was really the end of a long and sometimes pretty slow journey. So what was the official thinking behind it all? Well, for starters, for most countries in the EU, adopting the euro isn't really optional. It's part of the deal, a treaty obligation. But beyond that, the promises from leaders and the European Central Bank were pretty big. They argued the switch would bring more economic stability, make trade and travel way easier, lower the cost of borrowing money, and maybe most importantly, give a much-needed boost to the European Union's poorest member. And believe me, this has been a long road. Bulgaria joined the EU way back in 2007. The next huge step was in 2020 when it entered what's called the Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM2. That's basically the waiting room for the euro, where they pegged the lev to the euro's value. Finally, in 2025, they got the green light after meeting all these super strict economic criteria on things like inflation and debt. That paved the way for the big switch in 2026. So the government did its thing, it fulfilled its European promises. But that official story, it feels like it's a world away from the conversation happening on the streets, in the cafes and living rooms all across the country. And that right there is the $1,000,000, or should I say €1,000,000 question. Sure, a few dozen people gathered at the central bank to mark the moment, but the mood across a country of 6.7 million people, it was nowhere near a universal celebration. In fact, it was something else entirely. The numbers, well, they tell the whole story. This is a nation that is almost perfectly split right down the middle. I mean, look at that. Polling from just the last year shows support and opposition are in a statistical dead heat. And pollsters are finding that the skepticism is often highest in the smaller towns and villages, especially among pensioners. This slide really gets to the heart of the debate. On one side, you've got the official hopes, all those long-term economic benefits of stability and being part of the club. But on the other side, you have these deep personal fears. The number one fear is inflation, the idea that businesses will just round up prices and suddenly your money doesn't go as far. And it's not just about money. There are real fears about losing a piece of national identity and handing over financial control to bureaucrats in Brussels. And this quote from a pensioner in Sofia, wow, it really captures that feeling. You can hear the strong sense of national pride tied to the lev, which has these famous Bulgarian historical figures on it. And then underneath it all, there's this profound skepticism about where the European Union itself is even headed. But then you hear this from a younger person, and you see the total other side of the coin. It's this optimistic view that, hey, this is a step forward, a move that's only going to help us. It just highlights this really clear generational divide right at the heart of this whole debate. So let's step away from the emotional debate for a second and get into the practical stuff. How does a country of millions of people actually change the money in their pockets overnight? Okay, the single most important number in this entire transition is this one, 1.95583. That is the fixed, permanent, never going to change conversion rate. So €1 is always worth just under 2 lev. This rate was actually locked in way back in 2020, which gave the whole process some much-needed stability and predictability. Now, to make the switchover a little less chaotic, there's a clear plan. First, for months, all the prices in shops will be shown in both currencies. That's to help people get used to it. Second, you can still pay with your old Lev banknotes and coins for the whole first month. And third, for the first 6 months of 2026, you can just walk into any bank or post office and exchange your Lev cash for euros, totally for free. All right, let's zoom out. Because this decision isn't just about Bulgaria. It has some pretty big implications for the entire continent, and you can bet a lot of other nations are paying very, very close attention. Yeah, you could say Bulgaria has become a real-world experiment. Will all those promised benefits of stability and growth actually happen? Or will the fears of inflation and losing control turn out to be true? Whatever the outcome, it's going to send a really powerful message all across Europe. And this is exactly why. These are the other EU countries that haven't adopted the euro yet. Some of them, like Hungary, have governments that are pretty skeptical about handing more power to Brussels. In others, like Poland, the public just isn't sold on the idea. So they are all watching Bulgaria's experience to see if it gives them a roadmap to follow, or maybe a warning of what to avoid. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Bulgaria has placed a huge bet on deeper European integration. Is it going to be a winning hand that strengthens its economy and maybe inspires others to join? Or will it become a cautionary tale, just fueling more fears across a continent that's already pretty on edge? Only time will tell.